There are so many reasons to love living in Pennsylvania, but today I'm going to talk about something that not many people talk about, and that's the things that both the newer and the long-term Pennsylvania residents hate about living here in this state, starting with the weather. I have a love-hate relationship when it comes to the weather here in Pennsylvania because yes, we do receive all 4 seasons and it is absolutely beautiful, and I understand that we are one of the few states that truly experiences all 4 seasons throughout the year. But of course, it can come with some pretty harsh weather. During the winter, Pennsylvania averages 38 inches of snowfall each year, which is 10 inches more than the national average. In the winter, the average temperature is right around 33 degrees, but of course, we certainly have days that are down in the teens, and then every now and then we'll get lucky with a day up in the 50s, and then that single day will melt all the snow. The winters here in Pennsylvania can be pretty tricky because it really does depend on the year-by-year basis. Some winters will receive tons of snow, and some winters will receive only a couple of inches, of course, depending on where within the state of Pennsylvania you end up moving to. Besides the winter, we also have the warm spring season, the crisp fall season, and of course, we cannot forget about the hot, humid summers. If you currently live somewhere that you don't experience humidity or much humidity at all, you could get sweaty just by going out to do the small things like getting the mail or taking the dog for a walk on days when the humidity is high with no breeze. It can essentially feel like you're stuck in a hairdryer. If you would be moving from the south, our humidity here is nothing as bad as what the south experiences when it comes to humidity. But if you're coming from the more northern states or on the west coast, it might be quite a drastic difference coming to Pennsylvania or really anywhere on the East Coast. So I highly recommend to come and take a visit to Pennsylvania to truly experience what a humid summer is like here before you make the move to buy your home. Before we talk about the next thing that Pennsylvanians hate about living here, if you're planning on making the move and you need to find your perfect home, I would love to help you. All of my contact information is below. I look forward to hearing from you. The next thing that we have to talk about is the overall outdated infrastructure here in Pennsylvania. If you would be moving to Pennsylvania from down south or out west, where huge 5 or 6 lane highways with great smooth roads are common, it's going to be quite a shock to see 2 or maybe 3 lane highways here in Pennsylvania. Our highways here, for the most part, are full of bumps, cracks, potholes, etc. And speaking of roads, it feels like there are constant construction crews on those major highways. Of course, the bridges are safe here, but overall they are quite outdated and nothing compared to the beautiful brand new bridges that you might see in another state. The railroads here are very convenient, especially if you're living in a suburban area close to one of the cities, because the railroads provide very easy access right into the center city. The next thing that you might hate about living here in Pennsylvania also has to do with the roads, and well, that's the drivers. Here on the East Coast, we have a stigma that we're all in a rush, both on foot and when driving, so it could come off sometimes as a little rude because people have some road rage when driving to the next place they have to get, but unfortunately, that's kind of just the nature of the East Coast. I'm born and raised here, and truthfully, most of the people, just like everywhere else in the world, are extremely kind and nice to each other. Of course, there is just that small percentage of people that aren't. Definitely when it comes to kind of being in a rush, you'll definitely see that in some parts of the East Coast, specifically inside some of the largest cities. Comparing that to maybe down south where things are a lot slower, or even on the West Coast as well, you can definitely feel a bit rushed here sometimes. We're the time zone here that is awake first, and we're already working for 3 hours by the time the West Coast wakes up. We have New York City and Philadelphia, which are 2 of the largest cities in the entire country, so the job market there is constantly bustling and almost feels like it never stops. Those cities are filled with some of the largest companies in the world, so it's an extremely competitive job market and atmosphere, but overall you will just kind of get used to the hustle and bustle here, of course, depending on where within the state you're moving to. And plus, if you do end up moving to a somewhat fast-paced area within Pennsylvania, you could also escape for maybe a long weekend or a couple days to either the beautiful Pocono Mountains, the Jersey Shore, and of course, Florida is only a 2-hour plane ride, so we definitely have places both in and around Pennsylvania where you can go and take a minute to relax for a little bit. The next reason that we're going to talk about why people might hate living here, and that comes down to the wildlife, because the wildlife is abundant, with deer being the most common sighting apart from squirrels. The state has one of the highest rates of deer-involved car accidents, with a 1 in 52 chance of hitting a deer. It certainly depends on where within Pennsylvania you end up moving to. Of course, the more populated areas, the less likely that you'll have a deer encounter, but of course they are certainly there, and they're not very smart. You would think that if you're driving down the road and if you see a deer on the side of the road, of course slow down, but as you start to speed up, sometimes they will just dart right into the side of your car. So of course that's definitely one thing to be cautious of, especially when you're driving at night on the more secluded roads. Now for probably the most important category, which is the cost of living here in PA. If the overall cost of living for the entire country has a basis of 100, Pennsylvania came in at 94.6, or 5.4 points below the national average. To give you a better idea of exactly how this is broken down, let's take a look at some categories. Starting with groceries, Pennsylvania is 0.3 above the national average. The health category is 1.1 above the national average, and housing is significantly below the national average at only 80.5. Before we go on to the next category, and speaking of the housing cost, the entire state has an average housing cost of $261,312, a 5.4% increase over the last year, and it drastically depends on where within the state you end up moving to, because of course each area, zip code, and specific town all has their own individual cost of living. The remaining cost of living categories are utilities, which are 98.2 and below the national average, along with transportation at 104. And I believe the 4 points over the national average is because if you don't live within one of the cities within Pennsylvania or the surrounding suburbs around those cities, then the public transportation options are pretty limited, which comes down to needing a car insurance, gas, etc. The miscellaneous category comes in at 101.5, slightly above the national average. Depending on where you're moving from, the cost of living could be higher, but it really all depends on if we factor in taxes as well, because Pennsylvania, for the most part, beats out most of the other higher cost of living states. The next thing most people don't actually know about, but when they do, they learn to hate it, and that is the gas tax in PA. Pennsylvania has the second highest gas tax in all of the country, right behind California. The Pennsylvania gas tax is 61 cents per gallon, which is very high, but also keep in mind that just because Pennsylvania has the highest gas tax doesn't mean that they have the highest overall gas prices. Taking a look at the gas tax map throughout the country, almost every state on the West Coast has a higher overall gas price compared to Pennsylvania. And if you're moving to an area within Pennsylvania that is either extremely walkable or has very convenient public transportation, this isn't really something that you would need to consider. Rumor also has it that apparently the Senate is also working on reducing the gas tax here in Pennsylvania, just because it is truly just completely unnecessary. This next one is one that I personally don't like about living in Pennsylvania, and that's the seasonal allergies. Pennsylvania is full of lush, beautiful greenery, but of course that comes with some pretty bad seasonal allergies depending on, person by person. It certainly doesn't affect everyone, but if it does, it definitely puts a damper on some of the nice weather. I personally have allergies, and they start around March and go until around September or October. Some days are definitely worse than others, and some years are definitely worse than others. But if you have bad allergies in your current state, that certainly doesn't mean that you're going to have any bad allergies here in Pennsylvania, and also vice versa. So definitely, if you struggle with allergies where you currently live, take a short trip to Pennsylvania right around springtime to see if the allergies here will affect you or not. I've had multiple clients that have had allergies in their home state and then make the move here and have no allergies at all, and I'm completely jealous of them because my allergies are horrible. Is Pennsylvania for you? If so, I would love to help you find your perfect home here. All of my information is below, or you can click the contact link down in the description below. I will see you over on this next video.